I want to welcome everyone to the second annual Roots of American Food Conference. Last year, Hugh Atchison, we had to, this year we waited because we had to, but last year we waited because we had to too, but there was like, last year there was like 3 people in attendance, and Hugh Atchison was like, I can't talk to 3 people, like, let's wait. So, slowly but surely we are growing in numbers, and hopefully, next year it'll be really crowded, and we'll have to be exactly on time. So, promise you next year we'll be on time. This conference is really personal to me this year, because it was definitely a struggle to make it happen. A lot of different obstacles throughout the year that happened that I know some of the participants know, and I want to just say thank you for sticking with me and believing in what I'm trying to do, what my message is, and definitely for sticking with me and Jeremiah to honor him and honor this menu, which is, the match that lit the fire. So I'll let the more eloquent speakers move forward, and just wanted to say thank you very much for coming. So I'll introduce the first guy. I've known him for 7-8 years. For a chef, there's probably not a better year that you can have. Food and Wine Best New Chef, James Beard Award winner, marathon runner, and just really awesome guy, Dave Beran from Next.
Awesome. Well, I need the phone for my order of my speech, so I can remember. I wrote the notes at breakfast today because I really didn't know what to talk about. So well, this will be my table. Made a table. What do I do? Just hit this? Look at that. That work? Next. See? Next. All right. So most of you, I guess, have either been to Next or are very familiar with it. So I don't really have to talk a lot about it, but I will a little bit. Often when people come in, even in talking to Stuart last night when he was in the kitchen, I think people don't really have a grasp of what it fully takes to, I guess, do what we do every day, to change the menu, to design the kitchen, design the restaurant, and so on and so forth, to really create something that essentially has no identity, so it can have any identity. And I think that's probably one of the most intriguing things about Next, which is really ultimately what I wanted to focus on, because that's essentially been the last 4 years of my life. And people like Francis have been in every menu and been there since we were conceptualizing it. Same with William. Gary, who's been helping with the presentation, he dined back at Trio 150 years ago and last week. So it's really something that's kind of interesting, and it's drawn a lot of inspiration for us throughout the entire company, just from what we've learned in this. So Next, there's a couple really, I guess, unique things about it. Obviously, the ticket system. We've all seen Nick's interesting little stories about the ticket system, but I don't think a lot of people actually realize the benefit of that from the kitchen. And for me, it's become something that's really offered. Does everyone know about the ticket system and what we do? We sell tickets. We don't take reservations. So when you come in for dinner, you come in, you eat, and you leave because you've already bought dinner. Initially we had a lot of sort of, I guess, negative thoughts towards that, because people are like, well, why would I prepay for dinner and service and whatever when I don't even know what I'm getting yet? But what it did from a kitchen perspective, and something that we really don't talk about in the manifesto as it's written, or even in our discussions with other restaurants, is that people don't realize how beneficial it is for the kitchen. So what it affords me the opportunity to do is basically when we do, like currently we're serving duck, and so I bought those duck 9 months ago, and they've been raising them for me, and they're prepaid, and the farmer has all of his money ahead of time, so he can basically section off an area, raise the birds for me. He knows when the menu's over, he can stop raising them at that point. We get a great deal on it, and in turn, we can sell a menu substantially cheaper to the guest. You know, it's not often, even though our prices kind of fluctuate anywhere from, you know, 85 for some menus up to, you know, crazy ones like El Bulli that were, I think, $265 a person before wine. What it really does is it allows us to take, for example, the dry aged beef that we were serving last menu, or steakhouse menu. What menu are we now? During the steakhouse menu, we had like $50 a pound dry aged beef that we were getting for $17 a pound, and in turn being able to charge substantially less because we bought all of that way ahead. So the ticket system is one of those kind of unique nuances to Next that really, when you plan right, affords us a lot more opportunity. But that kind of leads more into, you know, I guess the things that interest me a little more about Next, and that's the dynamic of the restaurant, changing a restaurant, making it evolve. And so what we did is we essentially created a stage set. You know, it's most restaurants are like an elaborate movie production, right? You plan out the entire thing. You build this one room that is intended to create a complete and total scene. You design a kitchen specific for that cuisine, and that's what it is. You know, you go into a Chinese restaurant and you have your steam tables and your wok burners, and you know, French kitchen you have your brigade system set up. Most kitchens have a big suite in the center of them. Those two kitchens don't really overlap. So what we had to do in Next was design a restaurant and a kitchen that essentially is nothing, right? It's a stage. And so, you know, this is, I guess, the start of the Paris menu. I don't think the thing likes me anymore, Gary. Oh, wrong button. That's what it was. And so we have a kitchen table. We have a kitchen. Obviously, we have a kitchen. But what we really did was we tried to design this blank slate, this box, where any station can be a hot station, any station can be a cold station. You know, the coolers can switch to freezers. We have 21 induction burners, so we can make, you know, pastry, savory pastry. Essentially, if we wanted to, we could cover the entire pass with burners and do 21 soups a night. I don't know why we'd do that, but we could. But that really created this kind of versatile kitchen that's allowed us to do, you know, menus like Chinese or kaiseki or our Thai menu, but also a classic French menu like our opening one, which was Paris 1906. And so what we really set out to do whenever we craft the experiences, you know, and Will could attest to this at some point if you guys are ever talking to him later, because he's pretty funny. We really sit down and try to figure out the dynamic of the story for each menu. And so in this case, you know, with Paris, what we wanted to do is we wanted to approach it in a sense of how do you tell that story? What's the cover of the book? What are the chapters? You know, what is the theme behind it? And it never starts with food. Food is almost the last thing we really touch on. And so, you know, we start first with the dining room, and we sit down and we say, you know, how should it feel? How should it smell when you walk in? What's that tactile experience when you sit down and you touch the table? What is the way that the host greets you? You know, how would they greet you then? How would they greet you now? And you know, what should you get in your hand as soon as you sit down? Should there be a faceplate? Should there be, you know, if you notice in that last one, we had faceplate with folded napkin, water glass champagne flute, because we knew that whoever sat down immediately, that's what we would go to. That sort of classic French feeling. As we moved further in the menu, and I guess chef realized that we'd actually be sold out, so he let us spend a little more money. We actually started with stacked plates, and then it became this whole thing of how many plates can we stack on top of each other, which got annoying after a while, but it was fun. You know, classic service pieces, little nods to all the antique sort of old style of food. There you go, stacked plates. And so, you know, that menu right off the bat was very much you know, how do you make something feel old? That was our first test to how do you craft that experience? What is the stage set? If you think about when you go to theater, it's often, you know, they want to reference, we'll say, a living room, and so you simply have a dark room with one chair and a lamp and a table. And it opens the opportunity to let your imagination fill in the blanks, right? And so what we try to do very similarly is essentially create a few key nods that transport you. And from there, your imagination's allowed to run wild. We change the lighting, we change the music, but that's about it. And then the food and the servers really tell a story. Oh, there's my duck press. So then we moved from there into tour of Thailand, and that was the first time that we had to say, well, we all know how to do French food. We have the Alinea background, we have the obviously French laundry lineage, and so on. And so Thailand became street food, which became newspapers and eating with your hands. Colors and bright and loud music, and I think we played like Thai hip hop, which was fun. Childhood. I'm going to kind of breeze through these because they're just pictures, and I'm sure everyone's seen them. But childhood was very interesting because what we wanted to do is we wanted to create nostalgia. Anyone can, not anyone, but I guess anyone to some extent can find a cuisine and really latch onto it, research it, and serve it. And so with childhood, it was initially about a book. I really wanted to do a menu based on Shel Silverstein's book, Where the Sidewalk Ends. Because for me, that was very nostalgic. That's something that my mom used to read to me. It was one of the first books I had when I was little, other than the obligatory Dr. Seuss. And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of touch on that. At Alinea, we would often play with nostalgia. There was a course that we did for quite a while that was, I'm sure you've all seen it. It's an oak branch with tempura fried, pheasant fried on the end of it. And it's pheasant, apple cider, and pickled onion. And that's like a Michigan fall, right? You burn the oak leaves, you smell autumn. It's pheasant season, it's apple cider. Visiting my mom, I would go out and I would just get apple cider all the time. That's what they do, it's great. And so that dish became a snapshot of a Michigan fall. So then, Alinea is a lot of short stories like that. With Next, what we really wanted to do is we wanted to take that one individual story and extrapolate it out. So rather than, having a menu built of short stories, Next became this restaurant that was really a menu full of chapters to one story. And then each season is a different story. And so with childhood, obviously not every diner is American or furthermore Midwestern that dines at our restaurants. So we wanted to have a few key points of nostalgia, whether it was flavor or presentation. So like the course, this is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I grew up eating peanut butter and jellies all the time. But maybe some of you didn't. And so we had to find a way to trigger nostalgia with that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, even if you haven't had it. And so what we did is we served it inside of a present. Because as every little kid growing up, or every adult for that matter knows, whenever you get to open a present, there's that element of surprise and excitement. And so even if you don't know what's inside, you want to know, you need to know. And that brings up that initial moment of childhood. It's that sense of wonder and that sense of yearning and desire and, what the hell is this? And so that's just liquid peanut butter with a cube of strawberry patafouille inside, and then freeze-dried strawberry on the outside, tempura fried, and then inside of a present. So you would eat it, and we made the tempura out of, instead of flour, toasted bread. We toasted Wonder Bread. And so that was, it tastes like peanut butter. You ate it. Peanut butter and jelly, right? So, but again, multiple points of nostalgia. And so then you move on, and I spent the majority of at least my childhood in the school year in the East Coast. And so for me, I love fish and chips. Every Friday, my dad and I would go and get, fried cod or fried pollock or whatever it was, and, malt vinegar all over the French fries. And so this was our fish and chips. And what you don't see under there is walleye under the potato net with the cucumber waves that were pickled, and beer batter tempura, or beer batter crumbs, and a little lemon sun and whatever. But the whole thing with that is maybe you didn't have fish and chips, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going out on a limb when I said every one of us drew a picture when we were little, or if any of you are parents, your kids drew a picture and you stuck it on the refrigerator, right? So there was our picture on the fridge. And what we did is we picked, if people were left-handed, we flipped the picture. If people were, if we served to men, we drew a little boy, and if we served to women, we obviously drew a little girl fishing. And then in the holidays, we gave them costumes which was fun. We have Christmas trees and reindeers fishing and all kinds of stuff. Halloween got really interesting. Halloween was actually probably the coolest time ever at Next because during childhood people dressed up. And well, Wes, you were there. You remember all the silly costumes and the woman with the narwhal horn that you had to fix halfway through the night? That was one of the best things I've ever seen. And so I guess what it really came down to, and at this point in our career, ending the first year, we were starting to learn how to craft a story and create an entire nostalgic experience, or not even nostalgia, but more so just tell a complete story, rather than just having awesome dishes that moved in a progression that you wanted. And so with that, this is a great course because this is just, well, it's just chicken noodle soup, but the noodle's made out of chicken. And so the fun became, how do we relate our current menus to past menus, but also look forward? And so this is actually the hollandaise from the Paris menu made with chicken fat instead. That's the foam in the middle. And then the chicken mousse from, I think it was actually from the Thai menu. So, you know, we started reflecting on what we've done and trying to make each menu kind of nod to the past but look to the future. And then, you know, still sticking with, like, this is autumn scene, which as the season changed became winter scene. So we'd make it snow over it. And we changed the aroma underneath so early in the season. We had pumpkin and roasted apple and hay. And then as it moved later, we switched to juniper. I think we had like 3 different iterations of aroma that we'd torch underneath so you'd smell it. And one, you know, terrible afternoon, we sat outside hollowing these out on a Tuesday. But it worked. And so, you know, different triggers, some more obvious, some less obvious. But this became, I think, a great moment for us in learning how to tell a story. And a foie gras frosting that you'd eat off a beater. Because every little kid likes beaters, right? Eating off the frosting thing. Finished with an edible campfire. You know, campfire for me had a couple triggers. One, you know, it's obviously a source of heat and a way to sustain in the winter. Like, it's something that you'd huddle around at the end of the night. Maybe toast marshmallows over. My grandparents used to always light a fire and we'd drink hot chocolate at the end of the night. You know, so we wanted to basically end your meal with everyone sitting around a fire. So we took those sweet potatoes and we cooked them in blue corn and brown sugar, and we dyed them black, essentially, so they looked like logs, because my mom used to make sweet potato pie. So this dish is sweet potato pie. And then you end up with a campfire burning on your table with a plate in the background. And then from there it was, you know, how do we really, El Bulli had closed, and you know, we drew a lot of influence from that. And so it was, how do you really reflect on that? And so we worked with them and moved through, basically on a one-on-one basis. We wrote a 29-course menu of a dish from every year of their history. And so that became the, how do you recreate another restaurant that already existed that people have been to? And how do you uphold that without creating competition? You know, we don't want to compete with them. We wanted to promote them. And so with El Bulli, it became, you know, talking to Oriol and Mateu every day. You know, where did you find this plate? How did you do this? How did you create it? What was your technique? Why are we doing this wrong? And so that was the first time that we really learned how to tell someone else's story, or I guess to some extent uphold the philosophy and thought process of a different restaurant. And so what we did is we basically let them write the menu. You know, we went through all of the books and picked probably 8 courses from each year, and we're like, we love this, we want to do this. The initial idea was called El Bulli Regression, and what happened is as their menu grew, it grew forward. So instead of app, entree, dessert, it became pre-appetizers. And as they call them, obviously under different names, but it progressed forward. So our thought was, if we start at 2011 and work backwards, you have 2011, which is the newest course, which is the longest menu, and you end with their most classic dessert. That was a really cool idea that they didn't like. So instead what we did is we just talked to them, and we really worked on, you know, how they would want to start a progression. We based it off a 2007 menu format, and did 29, and depending on the day, up to 44 courses. So the olives, and we purchased all their old service pieces. Well, purchased or borrowed, depending on the piece. Some we wanted to keep. Some we wanted to borrow, and so they shipped us out. That's the giant gorgonzola sphere. That was a nightmare. Don't ever put that on your menu. Some service pieces you just couldn't buy, and that became, aside from that log that you saw in childhood, this became the first time that we really started working with other materials to make our own service pieces. We're really fortunate at Alinea that we have Martin Kastner, who, again, some of you may or may not know, but he's our designer at Alinea and Aviary, and he does all the kind of crazy service pieces that you see. The bow that the bacon hangs off of, the porthole that has the cocktail in it, and so on and so forth. But Martin has a terrible lead time. And so if you don't have an idea a year and a half out, you'll never get it. And so I needed this a week out. So we just ordered a bunch of metal, and we have some very artsy people on staff, and we made something happen. I think that was actually formed around a different wooden service piece that we also made in the alley. So from there, Sicily, first time we really started doing, all right, I'll move backwards for a second. So in each year, when we plan out our menus, we don't want to, you don't want to see, I guess, a reflection of each menu in every menu. You don't want the same menu with different flavors, because that's not really the point of it. You want to see a change, right? You're paying to go to a theater, so you don't want to see essentially 5 versions of the same play over and over again. So what we had to do is we had to change service style completely. And so the thought of moving away from a 29-course menu and making it different was to do a family style menu, an entire family style menu. And not just Sicily, because Sicily is, it's not that big, but it's an island. There's a lot of different things going on with it. So what we did is we found one specific person in Sicily, Fabrizia Lanza. Her mom was Anna Tusca Lanza, who owns their own culinary school. They have a vineyard, and basically I talked to her 3 times a week on the phone for what did we talk to her, a month and a half maybe, and just had conversations with her. And why does pasta con lassarde, why does it have tomatoes in it here and currants in it there and golden raisins in it in this recipe? And she said, well, I always put golden raisins red currants and tomatoes because that's what grows on my property. And so all of a sudden it became relevant, and we said, well, our versions of these should be specific to one area. We need to make this relevant. And so we basically made this menu off of her backyard. And so we talked to her about, local artists in the area, styles of food, what produce grew on her property, what didn't. She would never use golden raisins. That was blasphemy because she didn't have them. And so we found some artists, and we had some hand-painted Sicilian plates. Some you can find, some you can't find, but all in all, that really homey feel. We basically wanted it to feel not like you were stepping into Sicily, but like you were stepping into our home if we were next door to her home in Sicily. And so everything was family style, everything was shared, everything was basically revolving around forcing you to be friends with the people you're dining with. Otherwise, you'd have a pretty miserable meal. Right? You had to talk to everyone. So, so we did one block of pasta courses, so uni and batarga and sardines. But everything's shared, and of course the obligatory cassata cake. So we presented a whole cake and then brought it back and sliced it. That was interesting. None of us knew how to make a cake, so that was kind of crazy. I think that the thing about Next is really that the majority of the things we do, we didn't know how to do. I didn't know we did a kaiseki menu actually before the hunt, and I didn't know what kaiseki was. And so Chef and I went to Japan and ate all over the place and came back, and I was like, well, now we have to do this. And so we started working with kaiseki or just Japanese cuisine in general, and something about it became very not authentic. And so I would say the kaiseki menu was the first bridge to re-identify what Next was. Kaiseki, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, but it's a Japanese tasting menu, and basically what it is rice soup and pickles that the monks would eat before they would drink the matcha tea, before they would meditate, in the most simple form. Obviously, it's much more elaborate than that, but what happens is when you drink matcha tea, it can upset your stomach. But it has a lot of like long, slow release caffeine, and so they would drink that first before they would meditate, and it would keep them sustained and level. And it eventually evolved into a longer, drawn-out tasting menu that was sort of this like pre-tea ceremony. And so we were looking at it, and the obvious one was do spring kaiseki with the cherry blossoms, and it's probably the more famous one. But what we want to do instead is switch it and do autumn. And so the first thing we talked about was doing a toasted rice soup, because that seemed like a great way to open it. But we don't have rice growing in Chicago. It makes sense. Why would you serve rice? And that conversation about that rice soup led to what I believe next became and it has become to this point, and that's that we want to take all these global world techniques, styles, genres, like kaiseki, and relate them to where we are now. The philosophy of Alinea was always, we're going to find whatever the best in the world is, and we're going to bring it here. If there's this crazy fruit in Brazil that we want, we will bring it here and we will serve it. We will find the best mangosteen in the world. They don't grow here, but we will find them and we'll bring them in. All of a sudden, next with kaiseki became, what is kaiseki and how would you relate that to the Midwest? So our opening course, instead of toasted rice soup, became a toasted corn or a grilled roasted corn husk tea. So we grilled corn first to get that charred flavor. We slow roasted it afterwards to get just the nice depth to it, and then we made a tea out of it. And that's what you started with, because it represented the rice harvest, but it was corn, because corn is what grows here, right? I mean, my grandpa had corn in his backyard. That's just what you're used to. And so that led to, I guess, a real evolution at Next. So we had kaiseki, then the hunt, and then vegan. And those three menus were all similar in the fact that we wanted each one to reflect on the next. So in a kaiseki, you always have a course that reflects back to the previous season. And then throughout the middle of the menu, you see the season evolve. And then the final course looks forward to the next season. So we opened, at one point, were putting crickets on the table. Live crickets in a little bone cage, because often people at the end of summer would keep crickets to remind them of the summer as it was closing, as it was moving into autumn. And so we would start the menu with crickets early on, just so you'd hear them chirping. And then those went away and we moved into the middle of autumn. And then by the end of kaiseki, you were served a giant bowl of miso soup that looked like a snow-covered mountain. And so, it was this seasonal progression. And then moving forward into the hunt, what we wanted to do is we wanted to take that philosophy of kaiseki and bridge it over menus. And so now we took the hunt, and basically the opening course of hunt was a mushroom soup to remind you of kaiseki. And nearing the end of the hunt, you had a couple vegan courses to help you look forward to the upcoming menu. So it began to have a reflection of concept. And then the hunt was, I think, one of the first times that we really we went kind of crazy with the dining room. We had candles and we had scene changes mid-menu, and we rolled out these animal pelts, which were, well, it kind of made the restaurant smell like a barn a little bit. But different scenes in it where we had, an outdoors kind of feeling of cured meat, on natural wood. We moved to this sort of like old birch tree bark that we plated on. And then all of a sudden we went much more refined with it, because hunting can have many meanings. It can have, this meaning of, hunter-gatherer, survival, or sport. It can be like the old man's club of going out and hunting and then sitting around drinking your scotch in the library, or it can have, the loincloth and a spear, or it can have, just sport in general, fun, or if I don't hunt, I'll die. And so we wanted to try to reflect as much of that as we could, and this is more of the luxury sport end of it, where it's sturgeon with its own caviar and a candelabra. This one was actually a vegan course, because it just wanted to reflect, it's called Fallen Leaves, and it really just wanted to reflect what you would actually see and feel outside. So a lot of different kind of feelings and emotions in this menu. And then we ended it with, I think, one of my favorite courses at Next. It's not even our course. A Pied de Cochon and Sugar Shack talked a lot about it in their books. And it's essentially maple candy, and it's something that I did when I was little. And you take maple syrup and you reduce it, and then you pour it in snow, and you put a stick in it and you roll it up. And so that was immediately like a time and place thing for me. And so what we did is we made a snow trough on the table at the end of the menu, and we poured bourbon maple syrup, and people got to roll up their own candy at the end. And so that was kind of our farewell to that one, our vegan course at the end that brought you to the end of winter, because that's one of the final things. And then vegan, which was a nightmare, but it was awesome. Because the vegan was the same length as the El Bulli menu. It was 20, at its prime, it was 27 courses. But instead of doing 62 covers, we did 124 a night. And halfway through the menu, we took those wooden tables and we rolled out table padding and tablecloth over the top of them while you were eating. And completely flipped from feeling like you're outside with this, these apple branches with reindeer lichen growing on them that you would pick, and a pond that we would skim the herbs off of, crackers in the trees along with the playbill that you would read. Oh yeah, we make playbills. We tell those stories at the beginning. It's a little fun theatrical thing. We made that paper out of all of our old menus to wrap it in, which was a nightmare too, but it was fun. We learned how to make paper. So you had this sort of rustic outdoor feeling that all of a sudden transitions into tablecloth and refined plating. This was a menu, the first menu that was less about telling a story within a menu and more reflecting upon each previous menu. So, you have courses that could have shown up in other ones. This one we just wanted to look essentially like waves, like white waves. It was just white asparagus, and so everything was blank. We move forward and you end up with courses like this one reflected a course in the hunt, Selsfi. This reflected the kaiseki menu. This is kombu and soy milk. So, we started working with, for this menu especially, a lot of specific artists with plateware, primarily because we wanted that tactile experience, the notion of vegan. Are you waving me off, Stephen? Am I talking too long? You should have started on time. All right, so we started working with a lot of artists. The thing about vegan that people think about is they think about this sort of raw notion, this outside, this natural tactile feeling. And so we wanted to recreate that with a lot of our plateware. This was actually a broken piece of steel. That's our spaghetti squash bolognese. Oh, there's kaiseki. I knew it would appear somewhere. We'll go really fast through these. So I guess that's where I'm at. We made food at Next. And it changes all the time. This is about Christor. It's a culinary competition. We made a menu based off that where we had to parade these platters around to really loud fans cheering and TVs in the dining room and flags hanging everywhere. This friend of the house hated me. But we survived. There's some of my cooks. We have a really small team. So, steakhouse. It all looks like a steakhouse. Trophy wine list. Different dining room feel. A lot of steak. Modern Chinese. We switched all the tables to being bright red from wood or tablecloth. Finished with large share food, duck, sweetbreads like sweet and sour chicken and basai. Did I say that right? Basai?
No.
No, that's fine. I don't say El Bulli right either, but that's fine. I'm not Spanish, so. Or Chinese. That's one of Martin's pieces. It's kind of fun. So yeah, that's Next. That's kind of our evolution. It's one of those things where we basically have to sit back every time and say, how do you create a new feeling, a new emotion, a new story, and then write that story. And unfortunately, we don't close down for 2 weeks. We close down for 1 day, so it all has to happen in a day, overnight. But yeah, any questions about anything? A little slideshow, yes? Hi.
How far in advance do you start planning the next?
So our goal is that within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll know what all 3 of our menus are for next year. I think we have 2 of them decided already. It's just the 3rd one that we're not sure about. And then once we have that planned, from public perspective, we'll release an annual subscription in December, and then we'll release tickets after those are sold out. From a menu planning standpoint, it's a 16-week gap, so 2 weeks into the menu, I break away from the kitchen to start all my research. So I'll work service, but during the prep day, I won't have any more prep. I'm just hiding behind a mountain of books or cooking my own stuff. So, yeah. Yes, William.
What was your favorite menu, and what do you feel was the strongest menu? Are they the same?
I think kaiseki and vegan were probably my two favorites. Vegan primarily from a creative standpoint, from really learning what the restaurant could achieve and how hard we could actually work. From a success standpoint, overall, probably albuli. And it's tough to say because it wasn't our food, we didn't create any of it, but I think we did. You know, when you're looking at a restaurant that was considered to be one of the best in the world for however many years, and probably still will be, I mean, he's almost like the Escoffier of our generation to some extent from his impact on food. The fact that we were able to recreate their food over their entire history and serve it and have people from their staff come in, have people from the outside come in, and all of them say that we achieved what we were trying to achieve, I think that's probably the greatest success we've had. Any other questions? Steven waves me off and then he disappears. All right. Oh, hey, look at that. All right, that's all I have, I guess.